Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in World of Warcraft there's a lot of classes and a lot of specs for players to choose from, but which specs are gonna be the most popular? We've already done a video of the least popular specs, as in the least played specs within PvE content, but in this video we will try to figure out a measurable way to see which spec of every single class is the most popular. Now, I gotta say this ahead of the video. This video is by no means a, hey, you gotta play these specs if you want to achieve anything in the game. Frankly, as someone who plays Outlaw, whether they're good or whether they are not, and I played Outlaw through all of Legion, through the good and the bad times, you should play whatever class and spec that you like. You're the one paying the 15 bucks a month as a subscription for the game, so you might as well enjoy it any way you want to. And honestly, you can play whatever spec you want and you'll still be able to achieve the higher arena rating if you really try, or even some of the mythic raid fights. All this video is gonna do is take a look at the popularity of every spec to find out the specs that are the most played in the game for every single class right now in patch 8.2. Now, how we measure the popularity is going to be a little bit funky, and bear with me when I explain this. You can't really measure popularity through one metric. You can't really go by what is the most popular class of spec for a raid, because I feel like that doesn't really encompass what's everybody playing. But you also can't really get the direct numbers on what everybody is playing right now within population of WoW, because we don't have the access to those numbers. If we knew how many people were subscribed to World of Warcraft, what classes they played, and what specs they preferred, then we could figure out what everybody is playing, but that information isn't public. We do have different graphs from different websites that all say different information. So to make this video, I decided to use World of Warcraft logs, graphs that are available right now for the PvE as well as the PvP content of the game, and try to figure out the most popular specs through that. So we're looking at various types of content the players engage with, which does mean that there's a potential for there to be like 3 million Frost athletes that have never stepped their foot inside of a raid or a dungeon and are simply not counted in this video. Some results I was actually surprised by, and others really did confirm what I honestly believed in terms of which specs are popular for every class. But there is going to be a couple specs for a class that are very neck to neck, and I'll simply just have to pick one because I really don't want to make it a one-to-one comparison of the best spec per class in this video. The first class we'll start with is a Druid. I feel like everybody in the mother plays Druid, or everybody has a Druid as an alt. They're very versatile with 4 specs to choose from, so that made this video a lot harder. There's 4 specs to consider. In the end, I would have to settle between a balanced Druid or a restoration Druid. While Pharaohs and Guardians are not terrible, and Guardians and Pharaohs have gotten severely big buffs ever since before patch 8.2, we are still looking at specs that are still fairly fresh, and not a lot of people have warmed up to them. But Balanced Druid and Resto have proven themselves to be very popular within raids as well as PvP. But in this video, I have to give it to the Rested Druid. Restoration Druids are incredible healers for raids, Mythic Plus, as well as PvP. I don't think there's ever been a group where people take a look at Resto and they're like, well, I don't see how that could fit our composition, simply because they are really strong at healing over time, being able to spread heal for everybody else, and being able to maintain their healing output for the full party, whether it's a 5-man or a full-blown raid. And even though you're a healer, it does not mean you cannot do some decent DPS. Restoration Druids have the availability in PvE as well as PvP to swap into cat form and do some damage on the side. While you're not a full-blown feral Druid with the damage output of a real DPS, you can still do quite a number of damage to an enemy, whether in Mythic Pluses or PvP. On top of it, I think Restoration Druids is probably the best, friendliest to new players of a class when it comes to straight up healers. Restoration Druids have a lot of the cast as an instant cast. You put up a heal over time on an enemy and let that heal do the work for you. You don't have to spam the heals and get some sort of a ramp going. You simply just put up a hot and there you go, with some great utility cooldowns that can be used in raids and dungeons. Because of its easy nature for a lot of players that are new to the game, the friendliness that it offers, and the spec being not really quite as punishing as some of the other specs. Especially for healers, I have to give Restoration Druid the popularity #1 medal for the class of Druid. The next class on this video's list is gonna be the Death Knight. With Death Knights we have 3 options: Unholy, Enfrost for DPS, and Blood Death Knight for tanks. And with patch 8.2 trying to beef up both Frost and Unholy, how does the class and the DPS specs of Death Knight hold up? Taking a look at my numbers, I saw that the Blood Death Knight has gotten an increase of play, but out of the 3 specs, I would have to give it to Unholy. Unholy has been amazing for player versus player combat, so that's why a lot of players are picking up Unholy. And out of the 2 Frost and Unholy specs of choice, Unholy is only slightly ahead within the raid environment. Normally, I would give this role to Blood Death Knight as the most popular, but after Season 2 of Mythic Plus, a lot of Blood Death Knights got replaced with Protection Warriors because of the new Reaping affix, which encouraged for a lot of AoE heavy damage, which put the Blood Death Knight on a back burner. I would say give it a few more weeks and Blood Death Knights will be back to its own glory, because the Season 3 affix for Mythic Plus definitely makes him a lot more viable, and certain fights in the brand new raid actually do have strategies where you might want to use a 3rd tank as a Blood Death Knight for their amazing self-sustainability. But in this video, because of the PvP prowess, the amazing AoE damage that Unholy Death Knights bring in Mythic Plus, and them being only slightly ahead of Frost Death Knight, right now I would have to give the popularity of the spec to Unholy for the class of Death Knights. But if I'm honest, in the next few weeks, I could see Blood Death Knights taking things over very rapidly. But at least for the time of making this video, I would have to give this one to Unholy. Next on the list is the Hunter, and for Hunters this was kind of difficult to narrow. First of all, we do know that Survival Hunter is the least played spec of the 3 specs of Hunter, so that makes it easy. So it really just comes down to a choice of Marksman versus Beast Mastery Hunter. But after taking a look at a lot of the logs and a lot of the graphs, I have to go with Beast Mastery. Now, Marksman and BM are very close to one another, so if you want to play one or the other, or if you want to change up this video and just give this one to Marksman, you're more than welcome to. But a person would have to give this one to Beast Mastery. Beast Mastery still has that very much new player friendliness and an easy playstyle that a lot of people can get into. And if you were to take a look at this video in terms of popularity on just raw damage and performance within raids, then yeah, you could give this video for Marksman. But because the damage difference between BM and MM in the new raid is just so neck to neck, it is really hard to pick between one and the other. So I have to give this one to Beast Mastery, mainly for the accessibility. A lot of new players and most players that are not great at Hunters, let's say you have a Hunter as an ult, a lot of people would gravitate naturally towards Beast Mastery because it is the easiest one to pick up, and the damage you can output is actually fairly high. A lot of people find Beast Mastery a more useful spec, primarily in Mythic Plus dungeons. But this video, it turned out that both specs are very neck to neck, and I simply just had to pick one. Let me know if you prefer Marksman over Beast Mastery, or if you think Marksman is more popular than Beast Mastery in the comments below. Next we have mages, and I'm not gonna beat around the bush. We all know how powerful and popular and amazing, and everybody wants them when it comes to fire mages. Everybody loves a good old fire mage. Ever since patch 8.2, they became astronomically better than some of the other specs. Now, Frost is still fairly competitive to fire, but fire blows everybody in raids, out of water, and in PvP. Frost does retain its strong potential within Mythic Plus dungeons where AoE fights are concerned, and dealing with trash bags to be as efficient as possible is more of a purview for Frost mages. But still, fire, I mean, they've been insane, and I feel like a lot of people have been rerolling mages just as a chance to play fire. The new Essence system in patch 8.2, I gotta say, has been a godsend for certain specs. I mean, it made Survival Hunter super good, and I really do gotta give Blizzard credit here, but fire mages wouldn't have been as good as they are if it wasn't for that Essence system. And right now I'm enjoying my fire mage tremendously, and a lot of players are as well. So I have to give it to Fire Mage. They're simply the meta, it is undeniable, and they're really fun to play, and I would always recommend you guys to try out a Fire Mage if you've never tried one before. Next we have Demon Hunter, and this one only has 2 specs to pick from, and this one is not gonna be difficult either. Havoc Demon Hunters have been incredible. While Vengeance Demon Hunters in patch 8.2 did get a pretty massive buff to make it as competitive as some of the other tanks, and I'm so glad because I'm seeing so many more Demon Hunters queuing for Mythic Plus dungeons and even in raids. Havoc Demon Hunter still remains literally in the top 3 of the best melee DPS for the whole expansion of Battle for Azeroth. How many patches in a row now? I think what makes them really good is the great cleave damage, single target damage, and somebody at Blizzard probably loves their Demon Hunter, so they will never nerf them. Also, they have a great synergy with casters. Right now in the current meta, casters are a lot more encouraged by the developers with all the changes we've had for Mythic Plus as well as raids. And Demon Hunters buff the damage of those casters, so every guild is gonna want to have them, and almost nobody wants to get rid of a Demon Hunter for another class, simply because they're just so good. Honestly, what are you doing without a Demon Hunter alt? If you don't have a Demon Hunter as a max level alt right now, I feel like some of you guys are probably missing out the popular life. If I had to put the most popular spec on this list, I think Havoc might be at the tippity top, but that's just my opinion. Next we have Warlocks on this list, and Warlocks, I gotta be honest, I haven't seen you guys in quite a bit. I always run into Warlocks for PvP, primarily Destro, but when it comes to raids and dungeons, they are kind of far and few in between. Did something happen to Warlocks as of recent? I honestly think it might be because other classes have simply gotten better while Warlocks stayed the same, and maybe there is some fallback that happens from that. But taking a look at this list, we have to narrow it down to one spec. What I found out looking through this video right now is Affliction Warlocks are dominating the raiding scene. Destruction is dominating the PvP scene, and Demonology is still one of the more picked specs when it comes to Mythic Plus dungeons. So it comes down to me having to pick the best spec in the game, and I have to go with the raw numbers. In my raw numbers, it was very close, but I would say Destruction is only slightly ahead of the other specs. Destruction is very consistent because Chaos Bolts are very powerful and you can use them to havoc cleave multiple enemies. Chaos Bolts being strong will always give Destruction a playstyle where you just simply nuke the boss down or nuke 2 bosses down if that's the fight. They've more than proven themselves in PvP where they can literally rain, if they get lucky, rain infernals from the sky like it's a rain of fire. And it looks hilarious, looks deadly, and is overall awesome to the Warlock fantasy. And I would say with the right build, they probably can do pretty well against Demonology within dungeons, although Demonology is just so heavily focused on AoE, but maybe with a brand new Beguiling Affix being able to focus down, burst the enemy of the random emissaries that are scattered all over the dungeon might give Destruction a little bit of an edge. I would have to give it for Destro, but honestly, any Warlock spec in this list could have taken, so I'm just gonna take my personal current favorite, which is the Destruction Warlock, the Chaos Bolt slinging maniac. And then we have Monks. Now Monks was very difficult to choose from, and this one, I'll tell you right now, I couldn't choose the DPS spec. Not because it's bad, Windwalkers are great. If I ever run into Windwalker in arenas, they will train you to the ground. Fist of Fury is still very much hurt. And even in raids and dungeons, Windwalkers still make a solid DPS. Hell, if I got in a dungeon or a raid with a Windwalker, I wouldn't kick him because they're still very powerful. But for this class, with how strong your tank spec is and the healing spec, I have to go with one of those two. So yes, we do have tanks and healers in this video. And out of the two, I have to go only slightly in the direction of a Mystery Warrior Monk. Brewmasters right now, if I'm honest, is the meta if you are going for mythic raids, so everybody's gonna want to look for one. In terms of as a tank, they are a very solid tank that's very friendly to your healer, making them that much easier to heal. But I have to give this one, in terms of popularity, to the Mistweaver. Mistweavers are exceptionally powerful healers, and a lot of players have picked up on that. And with some of the changes to the essences, you can actually do a fist room playstyle, which I think once people figure that one out, a lot more players will pick up this spec. Mistweavers have also been very solid in Mythic Plus dungeons, which is why a lot of people like to snag a Mistweaver as a healer. And I've never met a moment where a Mistweaver was ever denied access inside of even an arena team, because they synergize super well with other people. While monks aren't the most popular class in the game by any measure, I would say that Mistweaver is only slightly ahead of Brewmaster, although you could make an argument that Brewmaster is popular because of just how good they are as a tank and how well they soak damage. But a lot of people gravitate towards Mistweaver because they're very mobile. They are counted as a melee, so you don't have to worry about pesky range mechanics or nothing. They have great output in healing, great cooldowns as well. They can stay at range and heal allies from afar, or get in melee and help out their team. Overall, a very fun active playstyle that a lot of players are gravitated to, with great defensive for self-sustain and mobility to get in and out of sticky situations. So this is why for monks I have to go with the Mistweaver as more of a personal choice, although again you could go with the Brewmaster. And then we have the Shamans. Now for Shamans it was kind of sort of difficult to figure out the best spec in the game right now. And I won't beat around the bush, Elemental Shamans are absolutely amazing in Mythic raids. A lot of guilds are even stacking Elemental Shamans because they're just that good. For player versus player, they make a very solid caster. Actually, I would say in the top 5 for certain. I mean, if you've ever ran into an Elemental Shaman in a 2v2 arena and you got literally one shot by a Shaman running blood of the enemy, big crit build, then you would know what I'm talking about. And in terms of running Mythic Plus dungeons, they are the more preferred spec. Now, they did do certain changes with the Essence system that does help out enhancement, but still Enhance isn't going to be at the tippity top yet for melee until maybe more people pick it up. And Restoration Druids are great within raids. They are sometimes shaky in PvP and are not the best choice for Mythic Plus simply because they are more suited to deal with healing large parties rather than a small group of 5. But Elemental Shamans are absurd, and I feel like if you've been holding on to your Ele Shaman and you felt like BFA hasn't been the best expansion for Shamans, even if you want to just check out Enhancement, be sure to check out Elemental as well. So out of the 3 specs for Shamans, I will have to give this one to Elemental. Trust me, play your Elemental Shaman, I think you guys will enjoy it. Apparently the new build for it is insane. I just don't have the Essence system because, let's be honest, the Essence system has been a little bit not old friendly, but I'll get there eventually. Priest is a class that I haven't played, I feel like, in a very long while. As I mentioned before with Shamans, the Essence system has definitely been very alt unfriendly, and Priest has been put on the back burner. But taking a look at the Priest, which specs are doing the best? You take a look at Holy, which is a very easy healing class to get into, but Holy Priests are still a little bit outmatched by Restoration Druid, simply in terms of the numbers of people playing Restoration over Holy, even though Holy is the simple version of a healer. And I know you might say that Discipline Priests look really popular because everybody wants them in the Mythic Plus group. Every Mythic raid that's competing right now for the race for World First Eternal Palace has at least a Disc Priest or 2 in the roster. And yes, while everybody wants them at the top level of the game, not a lot of players actually play a Disc Priest. They're actually a difficult class to pick up. There's a little nuance to the Disc Priest. Part of it is gear, part of it is figuring out the rotation of doing damage and healing and knowing when to do all that. Managing mana is also very important. So while the spec is very much craved after for top tier endgame gameplay, they still aren't too popular with the player base. No, I have to give the popularity contest to Shadow Priest. After their exploits in Battle for Dalaran, a lot of people picked up Shadow because they were simply obliterating everybody. The cleave damage, the burst damage, this single target that this spec can do if you have the right build is incredible. And I feel like the class fantasy behind a priest that uses shadow damage to mind control the enemy and mess with their sanity is just super cool and crafty. So a lot of players started playing priest because they were simply really good. And even though they got a nerf in patch 8.2, a lot of players still have their priests that they leveled and geared from the last raid. And priests are doing pretty decent damage even right now. So there's not a lot of people actually fleeing the class as what a lot of us expected it. So for the priests, I have to give Shadow the popularity contest winner. They're super fun to play, and if you haven't tried one or had one on the back burner, I think it's time to get them out of the woodworks and into the fight. When it comes to rogues, this one is really easy, and oh my goodness, do I love my Outlaw so much, but even I can admit through my pride that Assassination is the most popular spec in the game. If you take a look at the specs of rogue, you have the Outlaw, which is super fun and by my measure, probably the most fun spec in the whole game of Battle for Azeroth. But still, a lot of people really hate the RNG playstyle mechanic. If Slice and Dice was a viable option, I think a lot of people would be playing Outlaw. But when it comes to subtlety, it is really all about the burst damage, the lineups, and gear is a major component. Some players can get the gear, but they can't really get the rotations down, while others know the rotations, but they cannot get the gear. So the sub-dream simply cannot be realized. And this is why Assassination Rogue comes in. A lot of people find Assassination viable and want it is because Assassination is very consistent. If you want to do damage to an enemy, put up Vendetta on them. Simple. You don't have to do some crazy lineup or some sort of a buff fishing playstyle or fish for certain RNG procs. You just pop Vendetta and sink your damage into the enemy. Easy. And outside of your Vendetta windows, you simply maintain Growth and Rupture on the enemy. And that's it. It's very simple to pick up, but I wouldn't call rogues easy. None of the rogue specs are really easy, whether you PvP or do PvE, but I would say that Assassination is the simple, or better yet, straightforward with how it approaches damage and PvE as well as PvP content. Because of that, a lot more players can get behind the spec. It just makes sense. You don't have to do some kind of a statistical math equation every time you want to roll for some sort of buff where you can get 1 of 6 buffs or a 2 buff or a 5 buff combo, and it's just not worth. I mean, honestly, you should play whatever spec you like, but if you've ever wanted to try a rogue, every time even I have to recommend everybody to try out Assassination first. It'll get you the basics, it'll get you the basic combat, and it'll give you the guaranteed damage output that most people are looking at in a stealthy assassin. And then we have the Warrior. If you asked me in Season 2 what is the most popular spec of Warrior, I would have told you Prot. Everybody was playing Prot, whether it's raiding, whether it is Mythic Plus, it was simply the best spec all around. But right now in Season 3, with the Eternal Palace being out and in the PvP season, it is kind of hard to measure. Right now, Fury is probably ultimately the best spec for the PvE raiding content. In Mythic Plus dungeons, both Prot and Fury can make for a decent tank or a DPS, and Arms still dominates the PvP scene with its Mortal Strike playstyle. But if I had to really narrow the numbers down, I would have to say that most people enjoy and play the Fury Warrior. You see, when BFA came out, GCDs were reintroduced into the game, and a lot more abilities are on GCD as of this brand new expansion, and it gave it a very rocky start. A lot of people instantly started looking for a spec that was as least reliant on GCD as possible. Demon Hunter was one of the best choices, but the second best, and ultimately became a lot of people's favorite, was the Fury Warrior. The fast-paced playstyle, the haste-heavy approach to the enrage mechanic, and with Blizzard pruning a lot of the cooldown stacking that Furies had to do at the very beginning of BFA beta, the spec really grew into shape, and right now it feels probably the best to play at almost any level. The fast-paced abilities, the fast-paced playstyle makes the spec feel like it's so much faster than every other spec. The haze that you get naturally to reduce the global cooldown of most of your abilities from the enrage mechanic, which is really easy to maintain the whole time, is going to be integral to the spec's playstyle. And while Arms Warrior is still going to be the king of PvP, I would have to give Fury Warrior the popularity contest here. I would believe that most people would gravitate towards Fury after Blizzard has established the fast-paced approach to class design before stripping it away come BFA. And then we have the Paladin, and I would say all 3 specs of Paladins are really strong. Protection is a great tank, Retribution actually makes for a very solid DPS, and Holy makes for a great healer. With the Paladin as a class, there's no wrong option. When taking a look at the popularity of each spec, however, this is where it was really hard for me to make the decision. We have had a lot of people that love Retribution Paladins. I feel like the lore for them is probably the best. I mean, it's a warrior of light. It's very similar to Uther, leaping against the shadows, the darkness, the undead, the forces of evil, smiting it down and judging it with these massive wings that grow from your back like a damn angel. So there's no wonder why there's so many people playing Retribution Paladin. But I would say that between Retribution Paladin and Holy Paladin, primarily with Holy becoming super popular in patch 8.1.5 and in patch 8.2, you also add the fact that Holy Paladins are still some of the best healers for player versus player combat in BFA. So it really comes down to either picking the Holy Paladin, which is a massively great healer that's integral to some raid groups, literally a pillar of some of the healer compositions, or amazing for Mythic Plus content with a 5-man group with great damage, or one of the better healers in the game for player versus player combat, or picking the rich lore that draws so many people to the idea of a Retribution Paladin. And this one was tough. So I feel that both Retribution Paladin and Holy deserve to be at the rank 1 spot, but in this video I am gonna pick one spec over the other. And I have to go with the Holy Paladin. First of all, because we need one spec that is the most popular. It wouldn't make sense to have two specs that are the most popular. But again, those two share the rank 1 spot. The reason I have to go with Holy Paladin is because they have repressed me over a little bit of time. Paladins are never unwanted from Mythic Plus group, and if I ever see one, I always take a H-Pally if I can. The amount of damage they can put out too is actually quite nutty if you get a really good H-Pally. And in raids, they're fantastic. The amount of AoE and single target pressure that they can alleviate with their heals is incredible. And whenever I queue with random players for 2v2s or even 3v3 arenas and a Paladin decides to be my healer, I know that I can trust him with my life and just go out and blow DPS on whoever ends up facing us. I'm actually in the process of leveling Paladin right now, and I'm still not sure which spec I'm gonna personally play, whether it is Retribution Paladin or Holy. But because of just how powerful Holy has been, I really did want to highlight them here. And this video would have been very lame if I just picked DPS specs for every single class in the game, wouldn't it? Thank you guys so much for watching this video. As always, play whatever class and whatever spec that you enjoy. I think that is the best approach to the game at any situation. But if you wanted to know the most popular specs, this is the list. This list was really difficult to make because how do you define popularity? Do you define it by the amount of people that play a certain spec, or a certain spec that's doing really well at PvE, whether it's raids or dungeons? Like maybe everybody wants a Fire Mage, or player versus player where maybe the Demon Hunter is the hot new trend again. So hopefully this video gave you guys at least a bit of this and a bit of that, using multiple different charts to combine the most popular specs that a lot of people play. And this video is by no measure, and I really should mention this, a video of what's doing the most damage or the most amount of healing, rather just what's everybody gravitating to play. So in case you wanted to play a spec that a lot of other people are checking out right now in patch 8.2, this will be the video for you. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This video took a long time to put together. It was really just a lot of research and comparing data, but I have a lot of fun doing it because honestly, I'm kind of nerdy like that. Thank you guys all so much, and I'll see all of you in another video.